This works.
All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome and happy Valentine's Day. I have been reminded by my students that LEAP is batting 1,000 on picking terrible dates for things for you guys. Your emotions were due on Super Bowl Sunday. You're here on Valentine's Day. So we really appreciate you putting up with us. I'm Jennifer Kupar, the director of LEAP, so you can blame me, I guess, for the dates. Welcome to Introduction to AI and the Law. The law school is so pleased to be able to present this training to you. We recognize that AI is really changing the legal industry, as it is many industries, and that it's shaping how lawyers practice law both now and certainly when you graduate. So we are we think that this was an important investment in your futures. And we are so pleased to have Oliver Roberts here as our keynote speaker. You'll hear from a variety of people, but Oliver is your captain for the next 2 days. Oliver is the co-chair of the AI practice group at the Holtzman Vogel Law Firm. He is the editor-in-chief of the AI and the Law publication at the National Law Review. And he is the co-founder and CEO of Wickard AI. He does trainings in AI across the country, at law schools across the country and abroad. He actually did the first AI training in Ethiopia, which is super cool. And so I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. Does this microphone, can you guys hear me on this one? Okay, cool. So thank you so much for having me. I apologize, this is on Valentine's Day, but I did get you guys out of a LEAP class, so you're welcome. So we're gonna jump right into it, and today is the first session, and I just wanna start off. Also, by the way, this only works when it's really close, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, we'll start off just with attendance, so just take a couple seconds as I explain what we're gonna cover today. So this is a program that's spanning 2 days. I understand it's Friday to a Saturday, so we're gonna try to keep it fun, try to keep it engaging. There will be a certification exam at the end, but as I'll explain a little bit, it's not gonna be too difficult, just if you pay attention to what's going on. So I'll go to the next slide, and here, this is the program overview. Session 1 today, we're gonna cover Introduction to AI and LLMs. We're gonna go through the basic terminology of what is AI, what is generative AI, what are large language models. We're gonna get into the conceptual aspects of it. What is the technology that's actually driving large language models, and how is it being used in legal practice? Into session 2, which is tomorrow, we're gonna get more into the weeds of AI and legal practice. We're gonna use CoCounsel, we're gonna use Lexis AI, we're gonna get in depth on tools like Spellbook, which are used for transactional and contract review, and we're also gonna talk about the ethics, because I'm sure a lot of you have seen the headlines of lawyers filing hallucinated cases. Some of them are kind of funny. We'll cover some of them today, but you don't wanna be that guy, so pay attention to your ethical duties when you're using AI tools. And then finally, session 3, we're gonna cover more substantive aspects of AI. So we're gonna get into some of the pressing societal issues, ethical issues at a societal level that AI is presenting, such as potential copyright infringement, mass job displacement, and many other issues in that area. We're also gonna talk about some of the ways AI is being regulated at the federal level, which is not much, which has now left the states to figure out AI in their own unique ways. So we're gonna see a lot of AI regulation over the next year and 2 years as it goes into effect in some states. So this is gonna be a very exciting area. Even if you don't care about tech, could care less about AI, everything you do, whether you're going into employment, election law, AI is going to affect it. So having an understanding about how it affects your area of interest will be very important. And then finally, everyone's favorite part, the certification exam. This will be available starting on Sunday. It'll be available for an entire week. You can take it anytime you want. 60 multiple choice, gonna take just an hour. It's really not that difficult if you pay attention. So you don't have to go to gunner mode, just pay attention and you'll be totally fine. All right, so some course overview and expectations just to kind of set the field. This is a non-technical course. We will be covering some of the basic concepts of AI and large language models, but for the most part, it's focused on practical applications in the legal space. So both in terms of how AI is being used by lawyers in practice with the tools they're using, and also substantive aspects. I will let you know what technical things you need to know. We'll go through it. And I've also linked some further reading in case you actually are interested in that more technical aspects of it. Point two, AI is a quickly changing field. I taught this class in another law school a month ago, and I had to change like 40% of the content. That's how quickly it's changing in terms of the technological developments, in terms of the changes in AI. There's a change in presidential administration since then. There's a totally different perspective on AI regulation now. So it's quickly changing. So what I want you all to take away from this is just having a curious mindset, understanding the foundational concepts so you could actually keep up with the changes. Because if you don't have that baseline understanding, you're not going to be able to keep up with the rapid changes. How you doing? So goals, like I said, understand the basics, understand societal implications, the substantive aspects, and the legal practice. If you have any questions throughout, this will be engaging. I'll ask questions, but if you have like in-depth questions, feel free to just email me at this email address anytime, before, during, after the program. So I want to make one important point before jumping into today's session. AI presents a huge opportunity for all of you. Like I said, you could care less about AI, but if you have an area of interest, you could evaluate how AI is going to change that field. And you could be one of the first people to write on it for academic scholarship. You could carve out your own niche practice in a certain area, how it interacts with AI. It's just a huge opportunity because there's really not many people out there in the legal field who are studying this issue, who have been at it for years. And this is in contrast with, let's say, you want to go into election law or an employment law. You have to put 10 to 15 years of your life practicing, studying, just to catch up with the leaders in the field. AI is totally different. This is fundamentally changing at such a quick pace. If you get in early now and put in the work, you could be a leader in just a couple of years in this field. This presents a huge opportunity for all of you, no matter your interest area. I'm eventually going to figure this clicker out. All right, so switching today's session, like I said, we're going to cover the basics, the concepts, the terminology, as well as best practices for using AI tools. And I'm going to start off just with a hypothetical question. Does AI really matter? And obviously, my answer is yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So I'm going to run through quickly some of the reasons why it matters and how it's being used across different industries. And I'm sure at this point, you've seen the headlines. You've seen headlines of all the money flowing into AI, how companies are fundamentally changing their business models, like Salesforce, Microsoft, integrating AI into everything they do, and it leads to a lot more investment. In the legal tech space, that is, these companies like Westlaw, like Lexis, all these companies that build these tools for lawyers, they're also integrating AI, and a lot of money is flowing into this. So you should expect to see a lot more tools, a lot more capability in the legal space as well, which means these are new tools that you're going to be using in practice. You also see generative AI adoption among law firms as well. There's really not great statistics on this, but most of the law firms use AI on a daily basis, especially now that it's integrated into Thomson Reuters, CoCounsel. Lexis AI Search is integrated right in the search functionalities that lawyers use every single day. It's been used widely in e-discovery, which we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, and it's also used in contract review very often for transactional lawyers. And finally, we've also seen the negative use cases. Like I mentioned, lawyers filing hallucinated cases in court happens all the time, happened again just last week, and we'll talk about that case in just a little bit. But to round out some of these headlines with actual statistics, actual statistics here, 79% of legal professionals are now using AI in practice. That's according to a survey from this past fall. That's up from 23% just last year. So you can see the stark increase. When ChatGPT came out in 2022, it was November of 2022, late in the year, there was a little bit of hesitancy to adopting AI in 2023. There were a lot of those headlines of lawyers learned about hallucinations in legal research. But then the following year, 2024, just last year, we see a huge jump in the use of AI in legal practice. It was also corresponding with a big jump in AI use among businesses. So 72% of businesses already adopted AI for some business function, as well as 97% of business owners are bullish on the use of AI. And you may think, why do you care about business? Well, that's because your clients in the future will be using AI in some capacity. It's going to lead to new regulations that they need to navigate. They're going to have new issues, privacy issues, issues with potential clients or business deals involving AI because they're using it so extensively. So here's to round out some figures on daily usage for the individual consumer level. Over 300 million people are using ChatGPT weekly, and ChatGPT is just one of the many AI chatbots out there. There are hundreds out there, but usually around maybe 9 or 10 leading models that people use daily. But you're looking at over 1 billion user messages to ChatGPT per day. It's one of the fastest growing applications in human history. So here's some statistics on how people are actually using ChatGPT. This was a study done by, damn, this clicker is struggling today. Okay, this is a study done by Harvard Business Review, and this just shows you some of the main ways people are using AI just in their daily life. One of the leading is content creation and editing. As we'll talk about, AI is very good for idea ideation, just going through, coming up with new ideas, giving an outline for writing. Second is technical assistance and troubleshooting. This would be using it for coding. It's being used probably more so in coding than anywhere else. There's a new study that came out from Anthropic just last week on the economic impact of AI. And now, according to their study, one of the leading use cases of AI is coding and technical assistance. Then we have personal and professional support. This would be resume writing, just responding to emails, writing CVs, cover letters, learning education, using AI as a tutor or assistant for exam preparations. You have creativity and recreation, which kind of goes hand in hand with content creation. This would also be like, write me an itinerary for a trip I'm going on. Then research, analysis, decision making. This is less so because partly it's not that reliable for citations and getting highly accurate information, but also because there's dedicated platforms that people would use in place of a generalist chatbot like ChatGPT. But that just shows you some of the ways with statistics how people are using AI in practice right now. And one interesting use case, I like this meme. I think it's kind of funny. Yo, let me run this by my lawyer real quick. And then someone will put a legal document in ChatGPT. You laugh, it's a meme, but this is actually reality. So I've talked to many founders and people at companies, mostly startups, because they don't have the funding to hire big name law firms. They will literally just do things right in ChatGPT. They'll get like a client contract, they'll just drop it in and say, are there any terms adverse to me? I had someone I was in business with, when I sent them a partnership agreement, he literally ran it through Claude, which is a chatbot, and sent me back what Claude said and said, I want to, whatever Claude told me, I want to negotiate based on this. So this is like really used in practice, mostly by non-lawyers, to just do basic legal advice to avoid incurring costs of lawyers. I have no stats on that because really people aren't going to want to admit publicly that they're using ChatGPT as their lawyer for a company. It doesn't look good, but that's definitely a use case that I've seen in person in my experience. So now to go through how AI is being used just across different industries briefly. AI is being used in service chatbots as well as in call centers. You've probably seen on Amazon, they have an AI chatbot called Rufus. You could ask it questions. It's able to tap into data across all of Amazon's offerings and give you automatic responses. You've also seen it in call centers. I'll show you an example of an actual company that's building AI voice agents that could talk like real people on a sales call.
Hello. Hello, this is Maya with Lily the Cleaner. Are you interested in $50 off your first house cleaning? Sure. Great. May I ask you a few questions to make sure you qualify for this offer? Yes. Are you a first-time customer? I am. How many bedrooms is your home? 3. Great, you qualify for the offer. Let me transfer you to a live agent who will book your first clean.
Doesn't sound too humanistic yet, but it will be improved over time. But you can see how this works is you're having a voice conversation, and on the AI end, it takes the voice, converts it to text, feeds that into one of these AI models, could be a ChatGPT API, and then it's able to tap into it like you're having a conversation with ChatGPT. You get the text response, and then you convert the text back to voice, and it's able to have real live conversations. And you may think, oh, we've had automated customer service forever. Yes, but it's usually like press 2 for this, press 3. Now you're having actual engaging conversations that are more dynamic in nature. But with any good invention of AI sales agents, there's always a counter invention. So here is an anti-customer service AI.
In the UK, one company is now using new AI technology to trick the tricksters.
3 times W and then dot.
I think your profession is bothering people, right?
I'm just trying to have a little chat.
It's nearly been an hour.
hour! For the love of...
Gosh, how time flies.
This apparently is Daisy, an AI-generated grandmother developed by British phone company Virgin Media O2 to talk to scammers all day and basically waste their time so you don't have to. CBS News confirmed executive producer Melissa Matani is here in Studio 57 to talk.
So like I said, with any invention, there's a counter-invention to improve upon something. So that's the use in the customer service space. A lot of businesses are transitioning to AI-powered agents for sales outreach, for customer relations, for intake. AI in healthcare. AI has shown a lot of possible breakthroughs in the healthcare space. AI is able to detect earlier pancreatic cysts, lung cancer. There's some breakthroughs in breast cancer identification, identifying small patterns and things that the human eye cannot even see. Also in the healthcare space, AI in 2 studies have actually started outperforming doctors. So it's outperformed doctors in bedside manners in one study using Google AI. And then in another report that came out in November and republished in the New York Times, ChatGPT did better than physicians in identifying patient ailments. They took a bunch of sample files from old patients, gave them to doctors with ChatGPT, and just gave it to ChatGPT straight up and said, give a diagnosis. And because they're old files, the diagnoses were already known after the fact. And actually, AI did better than everybody, then doctors did better, and then finally, doctors with AI did worse, which is kind of ironic because it just goes to show that some doctors so distrusted AI in its assistance that they just resorted to their own judgment, maybe to be a little contrarian. So that was a very interesting study, shows the potential of AI in helping with diagnoses as well as patient treatment. So AI has also been used in finance and education. It's been used in finance for a very long time with trading algorithms. And we'll actually talk about this because it's relevant to DeepSeek. By show of hands, who's heard of DeepSeek? Higher, higher. Got someone laughing over there. Higher. I'd say like 50%. Okay. Anyone know why I'd say this is relevant to DeepSeek? The fact that AI has been used for trading algorithms for a while? DeepSeek was created by a hedge fund manager, and they do a lot of quantum finance and trading. So they're already building these tools that could process a lot of simultaneous data at the same time, which requires GPUs, which is the hardware. So this general concept of trying to create high volume data processing was used to help create DeepSeek. So that was the background of DeepSeek, started as a hedge fund, building these tools for quantum trading, and then ultimately convert into building a tool that is close to the same performance as ChatGPT and other models out there. Question?
Hi, yeah, this is from a slide back, but when you were talking about the AI doctor stuff, just because we are talking about this in a legal context, when they're running these kinds of studies and piloting these kinds of programs, how do they get around confidentiality law, HIPAA requirements, that kind of thing? Because this seems like the kind of thing where very sensitive data is being used.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know exactly how they did it in these studies, but I know there were older files, so potentially they got consent from the prior patients, or they anonymized the data, or just changed it under pseudonyms. So I'd imagine it would be one of those 3 things. I don't know specifically, but you have the headlines here, and you can look into it. Both of these headlines in the articles themselves, they link the full study. And I'm sure they're probably disclosing how they did it there as well. That's a good question. So AI and trading algorithms, it's been used in education as well as tutoring to create custom tutors for people in high school, college. I'm sure maybe you've used it for educational purposes as well. So that rounds out how AI is being used, just a little tour through how it's used in different industries as well as businesses, and now AI use by the government as well. Believe it or not, the government's kind of ahead on AI use at this point in time. It's being used by NASA for earth science climate modeling, for deep space exploration. That's probably less surprising that NASA is ahead on tech and development, but you also have the Department of Veterans Affairs using AI. This past fall, they actually piloted 2 internal generative AI chatbots, mostly for administrative functions, sending emails, writing drafts, talking points, but they're also ahead on AI. And unfortunately, the IRS is also ahead on AI, so they're using it to target people for audits. In some good ways, they're using it to identify people who could get refundable credits, but this is just a sample size to show you AI is being used and actively integrated in different government departments right now. Also, AI is being used now in the military context. There was a point in time where Meta, as well as Google, came out publicly and said, we're not going to use AI for military uses, we're just not going to do it, it's against our principles, and then everyone compromised on those principles. So in November 2024, this report covered the fact that Meta is now allowing the US government to use its open source AI models for military uses and purposes. And then just last week, Google quietly removed a pledge from 7 years ago on its website in which it pledged not to use AI for military purposes. They removed it from their website, and it seems they're moving in that direction. And I do think this is probably accelerated by the rise of DeepSeek, and now that AI is pretty highly politicized on an international scale, and it's now a matter of national security. So I think that's played into this Google decision. As for the Meta decision, they were open source, and there were reports that their open source model was being used by China and to help exacerbate some ongoing military conflicts. So they were reportedly more concerned that their AI, which is open source, would get banned by the US government under some policy where the US government doesn't want US open source models going around the world and being used by our adversaries. So there were different incentives, but it's interesting to see those incentives, how it influences tech policy, and ultimately what will happen in the AI race. And here is a report. We're still in the land of government use of AI. There was this report, and I assigned it in the syllabus for the last class, so we'll go more in depth then. But in December of this past year, the Bipartisan House Task Force on AI issued a very long report. You guys don't have to read the whole thing. I gave you like 10 pages. You're welcome. So it's very short, but it lays out how America could stay a leader in AI development. And it's very interesting because it's, one, bipartisan, so it shows you kind of what's the ground setting and agreement between both parties on AI. And they agree that the US needs to stay a leader on AI because it has many positives in drug acceleration, in economic development, improving efficiencies and reducing bureaucracy in government as well. But it also highlights the need to protect privacy rights, as well as preventing deepfakes and manipulation through deepfakes. And the report starts off with a number of philosophies and principles. And again, I find this very interesting because, again, this is bipartisan, and this is the lens through which they frame the entire report. These are bedrock principles all parties agree on right now. One, I'll point out the most important ones, promote AI innovation. So it's unequivocal that as the US government, as our policy, we're gonna promote more AI innovation, and this just underscores that this is not going away. AI is not this bubble, it's not crypto, it's not NFTs, so this is here to stay. And the second big one, empower government with AI. This is interesting because we're gonna actively see a push to get more AI usage in the government. We saw the examples in NASA, Department of Agriculture, as well as the IRS. So we've already seen it start to happen, but we should expect to continue to see it, which is gonna raise a host of issues in many different areas. For businesses, are businesses gonna challenge the IRS's use of AI to audit their business? Will it infringe upon someone's fundamental rights if they use it in certain criminal contexts? So this is gonna raise a host of issues as both parties are fine pushing forward with the use of AI in different government functions. So now we're gonna shift to AI use in legal practice to continue our tour of AI across industries. We'll go more in depth on this tomorrow, but just as a preface, the main ways in which AI is being used in legal practice and how you should expect to encounter it is one, document review and e-discovery. I'll give a more in-depth overview of e-discovery tomorrow. Basically, two parties are litigating, plaintiff, defendant. They eventually get past the motions practice. They're going to court. They have to disclose documents to the other side. It could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of big cases. In the past, this was done manually. A bunch of first-year associates sitting in a room with a box have to review those documents. Now AI is being used to help facilitate and increase the speed of that process. And I'll show you tomorrow how that actually works. Other main use case of AI, predictive decision-making and analytics. This is actually available in Lexis, where you could see if you're going to file a motion or have a case against a certain judge, you can look at the analytics of how that judge rules on certain cases, the percent of time that a certain case is cited in a specific legal matter and before a certain judge. So there's advanced analytics on case outcomes, case usage, and potential outcomes that a judge will ultimately decide on. 3, legal research and analysis. You've all probably seen this at this point. I know you guys are pretty ahead on AI and LEAP, so you probably use it for Lexis plus AI research. Co-counsel is now available to all law schools free, and you'll be using it for your exercises for this class. But AI is being used in legal research with varying degrees of accuracy. There's still very high hallucination rates on AI usage. So although I'm here to tout AI, I'm also a realist and would say that using just AI for legal research is a huge no-no, and we'll go into why more so tomorrow. And then legal writing and contract review. There are very good tools out there now for contract review, and I will show you one of those tomorrow. It's called Spellbook, where you literally open a contract and on the side of your Microsoft Word document have a pop-up that'll automatically review the entire document and tell you what terms you're missing, what provisions could help your side in a certain contract negotiation. So there's a more reliable use case as opposed to legal research. But these are some of the main ways AI is being used and how you should expect to use it in practice upon graduation. And I'll underscore this. There are actually 40 states that require a duty of technological competence among lawyers. Essentially what this means is you need to stay up to date on tech developments, and especially if you're using these technology tools, you need to have an understanding of how they work. You can't just pull up ChatGPT, do some research, get something written for you, and then file it in the court. You need to actually understand hallucination rates, how this case is actually getting generated, double check citations, and it's an ethical requirement in over 40 states. So that rounds out our tour of AI use across all these different industries. And the main takeaway that I'd like you to leave with is that AI is being deeply integrated into businesses, into government, and to legal practice, and is very much here to stay. But with all these positive benefits that we ran through, you of course have the negatives. So we're going to run through some of the issues and challenges presented by AI. One of the big ones right now, and this was more of a hot topic in the run-up to the 2024 election, a little less so now, but I'd imagine every election cycle, we're going to re-hear about this AI deepfakes in campaigns. It's where it's most salient. It's where it catches the attention of legislators because they're obviously the ones running in these campaigns. So if someone makes a deepfake against a legislator who's an incumbent, they know this is an issue, they're going to be more likely to act on it because they're very much aware of it. So here are some of the headlines that are somewhat recent. AI is being used to trick people in different scams. It's being used to mimic the voices of loved ones. We saw the example of that old grandma, but imagine taking a clip of someone you know, friend or family, being able to then use that short clip to then create a clone of someone's voice and then call you to try and trick you into giving you money, doing something for them. So this is actually something that's happening. It's also down in Florida. There were examples after a hurricane of fraudulent calls about false insurance claims and calls for money. So this is very much something that's going on, not only in images and videos, but also in voice calls as well. And I'll show you an example of one of these, and it's this last one. I don't know if you guys remember, but in May of 2024, this was still during the Democratic primary in New Hampshire, there was a political consultant that had the bright idea of taking one clip of Joe Biden's voice, cloning it into a full conversation, and then calling voters in New Hampshire, telling them not to turn out and vote. And it led to a $6 million fine. And here is a clip of that.
Potentially troubling uses of artificial intelligence when it comes to political campaigns. Well, here in New Hampshire, we're already seeing an example of just that.
Important that you save your vote for the November election. We'll need your help in electing Democrats up and down the ticket. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
Now, let's be clear. That was a robocall placed to voters right where we are here in New Hampshire, and the voice sounded an awful like President Biden urging people to not vote in today's primary. Here's the thing, though. That was not Joe Biden. It was what they call a deep fake. It was all created by artificial intelligence.
So that's an example of how realistic voice cloning is at this point in time. And here's two definitions of deepfake. It really varies depending on the source. I have one definition from Merriam-Webster, any image or recording that's been convincingly altered to manipulate or misrepresent someone as doing or saying something that they did not actually do or say. And you have here a definition from the Government Accountability Office, somewhat similar but a little vague. So this is something where a lot of states, question?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious. I think this is deeply troubling. I mean, if you look at where we are, how divided our countries, our political parties, this is something that could be, I mean, just horrendous, right? It could lead to violence. I'm curious what you think we can do to tag these sorts of videos to ensure that they don't. I don't know how you restrict access, but what do we do to ensure that people aren't led down a reality that's just not real, right? It's very scary to me. I was just curious to get your thoughts.
So yeah, good point. At this point, at least 19 states have introduced bills to ban deepfakes, and we'll cover this in the last session when we get into regulation, but there's actually varying approaches. In Texas and California, you can't make deepfakes to influence elections, but it's Minnesota, and I believe Wisconsin, you can't make deepfakes to influence an election 90 days out from the election. So if you're 91 days out, have fun. 90 days, can't do it. So a lot of these states have stepped in and banned it. A big issue is First Amendment, and there are First Amendment challenges to this, because where do you draw the line? And I'll actually jump ahead and ask you this question. Here's an example from last week in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. And allegedly, the opponent of Susan Crawford took this real image of Susan Crawford and then made this purported edit using AI and used it in a video. And they filed a complaint with the ethics committee in Wisconsin. So do you think this is something that should be outlawed, or is this an okay use of editing using AI? Who thinks this should be outlawed? Who says no, it's fine? So that kind of just goes to show, where do you draw the line? It sounds good, let's ban this, but at what point do you draw the line? Also, pre-AI, generative AI, people edit pictures all the time. They'll take a politician in one scenario, put him with a dark background, make it look super scary. So is that okay? But this now isn't? So it's very tough. Where do you draw the line? There are many First Amendment challenges challenging these types of laws in California, one in Minnesota, which we'll talk about today for other reasons, but we'll also touch on that. So it's a good question. It's always, where do you draw the line? How do you balance it against other First Amendment rights? So I'll jump back here. We did a definition of deepfakes. I give two definitions, but again, it's tough to even define this, and it's even tougher to apply this in practice. But it's going to become even more of an issue. In December of 2024, OpenAI released Sora. This is text-to-video creation. So now the public could go in and create these. I have a ChatGPT account, $20 a month. It gives you access to Sora, where you can create highly, highly realistic videos. So that's why I say I think this issue is just going to become worse, because now the public has greater accessibility, where before Sora, you had some tools like Midjourney, some niche tools out there, but the public wasn't really generally aware of it. Now it's very much accessible. And to get to this, and also mention Google, they have VO2, not yet publicly available, but based on some of the examples that have come out, it's even more realistic than Sora. And now we'll do a quick segment, real or fake. I have 4 videos that could be real or could be fake, your call. So I'll play the first one here. An image of a robbery on surveillance cam. Who says real? 1, 2. Who says fake? All right, the fake crowd wins. I made this on OpenAI's Sora, writing, create highly realistic security footage of a bank robbery. Looks pretty realistic to me. Here's another. Eagles Super Bowl celebration. No sharing answers. Real, who says real? 1. Who said, well, everyone else says fake. It's fake. Yeah, this is not real. The prompt, highly realistic Philadelphia Eagles players celebrating a Super Bowl win. That one was a little easier. All right, 3. Real or fake? Someone rolling a joint. Real or fake? Who says real? Who says fake? It is fake. I added the exhibit up top to try and make like it was an exhibit from a criminal case just to throw you off, but this one's still fake. What do you say? Honestly, I don't know. But this was the prompt: security camera footage showing tenants breaking property rules. So you can see how realistic some of these videos could be. Here's the last one. Ready?
What's up, Case Western Reserve Law students? It's Big Boom AJ.
And Big Justice.
And this message coming to you from Oliver. Oliver, for sending this message to the Case Western Reserve Law students, you get a big boom! All right, so Big Justice, here's what's going on. Oliver's going to be teaching a course. It's the Intro to AI and Law at Case Western Reserve School, and it's happening on Valentine's Day weekend. That's how big. Boom! All right, so now, while the rest of the world is out on dates, the Case Western Reserve Law students is going to be spending time with their true love, which is AI and law. That's how big. Boom! So get over to Costco, get some
chicken mix
and a double chunk chocolate cookie, and bring the boom!
All right, we have three options. Who says real? Who says fake? Who says cringe? There's two right answers. It's real and a little cringe. That was a $300 joke, so I appreciate it. They're very expensive these days. It's crazy. Okay. So that rounds out the segment of real or fake. And the takeaway is deepfakes are more realistic and easier to create than ever before. And you may be wondering, why do you care about this? Because this could raise issues for you all in legal practice. You can think about evidence fabrication. I just showed you videos of security cam footage of people breaking property rules. Totally fake. You can think about legislation, as we talked about. These AI deepfake laws in different states are now being challenged on First Amendment grounds. And for some of you, if you're going into government, you may be defending some of these laws on the other side, as the Attorney General is in many of these cases across these states. And then litigation, you think election law. I mentioned the one, and I'll show you on the next slide. We already talked about the Wisconsin judge leading to litigation, ethics complaints in election law. You can think about defamation. If you're creating a video, putting someone in a compromising position or something that is defaming them could lead to defamation litigation, as well as similarly false light litigation as well. So this will raise many issues in the legal space for us as lawyers. And we already touched on this example, where it's a slight alteration but led to the filing of an ethics complaint, and I linked the actual ethics complaint as well as the law in Wisconsin to give you a sense of what these deepfake laws actually look like. And I'll read this one briefly. According to this Wisconsin statute on deepfakes, every audio communication otherwise described in subsection 2, A or B, containing express advocacy or issue advocacy or supporting or opposing a referendum, and that contains synthetic media, shall include both at the beginning and at the end of the communication, contains content generated by AI. So some of the ways some of the states are dealing with this require an explicit disclosure, and this is similar to paid for by so-and-so's political campaign on all the ads you see. So this is one way they're approaching it. And notice they say synthetic media. Again, how do you define that? Most people who make campaign videos are using Adobe Editor or some editing software. Is that synthetic? And then what is even considered non-synthetic? If I take a picture on my phone, but use a filter, is that now synthetic? So these are very tough to define, these terms, and they're being challenged in many of these states on First Amendment grounds. Okay, other issues raised. We just covered some of the issues of deepfakes. Other issues are copyright. We'll touch more on this in the substantive aspect, but at a high level, there's over 35 suits now across the country where you have these publishers, the New York Times, Raw Story, New York Post, Wall Street Journal, suing these AI companies. And does anyone know, at a high level, why they're bringing these suits? Yes? Yeah, spot on. So essentially, these AI companies just web scraped the internet, took articles from the New York Times, all these other publishers to train their models without paying for them, sometimes going around paywalls as well. So now these publishers who own copyrights to all their articles are suing the AI companies saying, hey, you infringed our copyright and you did it willfully. So potentially in the New York Times versus OpenAI lawsuit, OpenAI could be liable for billions, even trillions of dollars if there's the punitive aspect added in, which is something like $100,000 per violation and it's alleged there's over 1 million New York Times articles that have been infringed. So that's a very basic intro. We'll go more into that on tomorrow, Saturday. But with that said, I'll play this one clip, which I find kind of humorous. This is the OpenAI CTO. This is from last March. She was asked, how did you all, OpenAI, create Sora? And again, Sora is that text-to-video generation. Here's her answer in this interview.
It was used to train Sora.
We used publicly available data and licensed data.
So, videos on YouTube?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Okay. Videos from Facebook, Instagram?
You know, if they were publicly available, publicly available to use, there might be the data, but I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not confident about it.
What about Shutterstock? I know you guys have a deal with them.
I'm just not going to go into the details of the data that was used, but it was publicly available or licensed data.
Doesn't look good. Not a great interview, not a great look for OpenAI. And just because something's publicly available or publicly accessible doesn't mean you could use it for training purposes. But with that said, there are a lot, it's an ongoing, all these cases are still ongoing. One of them settled involving Thomson Reuters, where there was this company, I believe it's called Ross Intelligence. They use Thomson Reuters head note summaries from the legal cases that you see when you open a case. And there was a decision that came out 2 days ago in favor of Thomson Reuters. But that's different because those are two companies competing in the same space. So there's a lot more nuance to it than just this. There's also fair use, where there are certain carve-outs when you can actually use certain copyrighted materials if you're doing it in a way that's transformative, not competing, and there are many other prongs. But that's just to give you a high-level overview of how AI and copyright are really at tension. And we may see major changes in copyright law as these cases play out. Job displacement is another major issue. There is this adage that people have loved to say where it's AI is going to come in and do all these mundane tasks and free up your time to do more high-value tasks. I personally think that's nonsense. At the end of the day, businesses are integrating AI in order to cut costs and improve efficiency. And if you're one of the highest performers and requiring a lot of intellectual rigor in what you're doing, you're going to probably get replaced because that's in a business's interest. So these are some stats to show you. As we said in the first slide, in the very early, 72% of businesses already adopting it. And now there's 77% of people concerned about job loss. And I personally think that is a very valid concern. I think we can see mass layoffs. We've already seen these big tech companies do massive layoffs. Salesforce, they are what we call a CRM. Most businesses use it, where it's basically keeping all your customer interactions, tracking leads. They're doing massive layoffs as well. So I do think mass job displacement is something we could see in the very near future as AI continues to replace tasks both at a more repetitive level, but also higher value tasks as well. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. For those in employment law, would be really advantageous for you to get ahead, understand these issues, because you could be the go-to person who helps fight against mass job displacement in the AI space. And then finally, AGI. Does anyone know what AGI means? What it stands for? And then what it is? Yes. Yeah, and what is it?
It's the ability of the computer to original things, plan, or reasonably create or generate thoughts, ideas, in a way to duplicate human or to be a human or conscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What AGI stands for?
Artificial General Intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else have another definition? Oh, there's someone in the back corner. No, I'm just kidding. I'm only kidding.
Oh.
There's no one there. I'm kidding.
I'm ready.
So the definition of AGI, it really depends who you ask. It does stand for Artificial General Intelligence, but if you ask someone, the definitions will change every time. There are definitions from like over a decade ago saying that AGI is just allowing you to carry out functions that are better than a human being would. By some metrics, we've already achieved that. Here's one definition. The intention of an AGI system is to perform any task that a human being is capable of. That's generally the best definition I've seen, but then it's how do you evaluate that? So the takeaway is AGI, it's when an AI model could perform more economically valuable tasks than a human could. How to benchmark that is very difficult. And a new definition came in supposedly last year. Microsoft is one of the biggest investors in OpenAI. So Microsoft has Copilot, all these AI tools, and they're investing in OpenAI. OpenAI then gives their API to be the foundation for a lot of Microsoft's products that use AI. They supposedly have an agreement where they define AGI as an AI system that could generate $100 billion in revenue. So they've now even changed the definition to make it less idealistic, word-based, and now just economically focused on a target. But that's their own reportedly internal agreement to help benchmark it, because it's tough to benchmark otherwise. Point is, AGI is something you're going to hear about a lot. Supposedly, it's going to be achieved this year, according to some people in the AI space. So this is a word you're going to hear pretty often, artificial general intelligence. So as we get closer to AGI, some interesting phenomenon and studies, one of which came out of Anthropic, there was alignment faking. What this means is these AI companies train these AI models, and they have a certain persona, they carry out certain activities. Then what happens if some of the output from an AI model is nefarious, or it's putting out things that you would not want to influence society? So Anthropic developers, they tried to retrain the model and give it new directions, try to give it a new personality per se, and they realized that in this process, 12% of the time, the AI faked alignment, which means when the developers tried to retrain it, the AI internally faked to go along with the developers while knowing internally it was going to stick to its training predilections. So this is very interesting, especially as we talk about AI safety, putting in guardrails. Can these AI models actually be reined in and retrained, or will they stick to their original training predilections? This is another thing interesting to see, especially as AGI comes into existence, where these models will be even smarter than humans. Can we even control them? Can we accurately retrain them? Here's an interesting one. I included this one for Valentine's Day. So there are people, according to this report from MIT Technology Review from August 2024, there are people forming connections with their AI systems, forming emotional bonds, and it's becoming even worse in light of the advanced voice mode, which I'll show you later on. So they actually have seen people talk to these AI models as if they're real people, saying this is our last day together. And according to their analysis, over 1 million ChatGPT logs, sexual role-playing, emotional bonding is the second most popular use case. So this is something that's rather concerning, especially as these AI models get more realistic in terms of their voice, video, interactions. So this is something to follow, be aware of, especially because in some contexts, this has led to children forming bonds with these AI models, and some of them have led to children taking their own life. In some states, self-harm. We'll cover some of those cases on the last day, but there are some real serious consequences as a result of this phenomenon. Okay, now we're going to get into issues and challenges presented by AI in legal practice. Client-related issues, number one, I've mentioned this now, AI regulation is coming into the fold, not at the federal level. The federal approach has been non-regulatory and rolled back regulations from the Biden administration. As a result, it's now, as the term you guys probably know from con law, laboratories of democracy. All the states are now left to figure out their own AI policies. Colorado, first state in the country to have a comprehensive AI regulatory framework. California's passed, I believe it's like 13 bills now on AI. They're more domain specific, addressing niche issues as opposed to a comprehensive framework. Illinois has a law that limits the use of AI in certain job interviews, where you have to notify a job interviewee before using AI, and there's many more to come. Texas might be the next state to pass comprehensive AI regulation. Connecticut has a similar bill. New York has a similar bill. So there's going to be a lot of regulation going on in the states. Other client-related issues that you may encounter with AI, reviewing vendor contracts, no matter where you are, whether you're going to run your own law firm, work at a law firm, do vendor contract review for clients, there are now new things coming into the fold as a result of AI. There's new data protection issues. How is this vendor, and when I say vendor, I'm talking about a legal tech product. Imagine you have an AI company that comes in, says, oh, I have this great solution for you. You could use us as a chatbot that's specific to your area of business. Let's say it's really great at customer service. So you have a chatbot, and this vendor is trying to sell it to your business or sell it to your law firm. You need to look in and see, how are they protecting your data? Because when you put your data into their product, it could be trained on. There could be supervised learning going on. It could be learning from your data, sending it back to some data aggregator, and your data is no longer protected. Confidentiality is another big one. How are they handling your data on the back end? Are they handling it confidentially, or are you potentially breaching your duty as a lawyer with confidentiality with your client if you're putting your client's data into these generative AI tools? Monitoring and notification of AI updates. A lot of these vendors and existing companies, they've now integrated AI into their products. So you might have contracts with these companies, but now they're introducing generative AI features which could compromise data, and you need to stay on top of those updates to see how your vendors are changing their product offerings and potentially compromising your data now. Audit logging and retention policies. This goes into AI governance, where depending on the state you're in, there are certain states that will require you to audit log as well as retain logs of what data you're using as an AI company. So you might have to create a list of, here are all the data sources we use to train our model, or here's all the red teaming that we did, which is the process of trying to basically jailbreak an AI model. Here's all the testing we did before launching our product live. So you're going to want to know about these security features. Again, there's a lot more detail to this, but it's just putting on your radar some of the ways you may interact with AI from a client management perspective. Reviewing AI-related deals and transactions, that's another big one. Like I mentioned, Microsoft and OpenAI, in their deal, they created this new thing, AGI, defined by $100 billion. So in order to do that, you'd have to have an understanding of what AGI is, what some of the benchmarks are, to then propose a new definition of AGI. So this is just an example of how knowing some of this terminology and how this technology works could benefit you in certain AI-related deals and transactions. And then expert declarations, new forms of evidence, new methods of presenting evidence. These are all ones to look out for, especially if you're a first, second-year associate. It may be your job to do that perhaps lower level review on certain evidence that your experts submit to court, or review the opposing side's experts' declarations. And we'll see in a little bit, even the experts are prone to citing hallucinated cases. And then also new forms of evidence. This is actually not AI related, but in Florida, there was a stand your ground case where someone was accused of injuring someone else, but allegedly it was self-defense. And in order to present that evidence to the court, the defense attorney did an AI, well, technically it's not AI, but they did a VR simulation where they gave the judge Oculus headphones, and the judge was able to watch it happen in live time in a recreated VR reality. So there's going to be new forms of evidence presented to the courts, and it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Related to AI challenges, and yeah, question?
Allowed under rules of evidence. Wasn't that too biased, I guess? Yeah.
They allowed it, but I'm sure it's going to get appealed, and then it's going to be like the appellate court or the Florida Supreme Court that makes the ultimate call, because it could, in theory, be too prejudicial in the presentation format. So it'll be interesting, and I mean, that would set a pretty, it is reportedly the first use of VR in the country, so that would set a pretty big precedent. And I mean, if I were a defense attorney, if you're able to recreate a scene and show a highly chaotic, it was actually at a wedding. I think it was a wedding or a wedding venue, very chaotic. And seeing the VR, I was pretty compelled. I didn't know any of the details, but I watched. I was like, that's a lot more compelling than just me speaking about, oh, he was attacked by 4 people. So we'll see how that plays out. It's in the Florida State Court.
Thank you.
I'll play the video. I'll bring the video tomorrow, so I'll play it so you guys can see it. All right, so that's client related. Another question?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anat Beck. How are you doing? I was wondering if you can just quickly explain, you mentioned in the Microsoft and OpenAI, the new AGI definition, right? I think it's very important. Does it differ from firm to firm? Like, what should we pay attention to with regards to that? Because I'm sure they have incentives, right, with regards to how they would define that. And OpenAI came under a lot of scrutiny. For example, there were whistleblowers with the SEC in terms of its employees. So what are some of the things that, maybe as future lawyers, they should be paying attention to with regards to the definition of AGI? Or maybe you'll go over it later. So I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I don't think it's going to affect you in terms of you figuring out the definition of AGI. I mean, if you're in one of these deals, it'll be like a term of a contract, so you'll be in it from that perspective. But otherwise, it's really the same way there's no set definition of AGI. There's no set understanding of how it's going to actually change the world. According to Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, he's wrote a blog post about this saying that we're going to achieve AGI and nothing's really going to change. It'll feel all the same. Whereas you ask someone like 2 years ago, what's going to happen with AGI? They would say, oh, mass layoffs, totally changing the economy. So there are very differing perspectives on how it's actually going to manifest and affect us. For lawyers, I think we're a little bit safer because we're going to achieve AGI. But as you've all seen, you could use a chatbot. It's very good for stuff, but it's not good for legal research. So kind of when we achieve AGI, it'll do things that a human could do, but still like being a lawyer is like a step up in terms of analytics, judgment, empathy needed. So I do think AGI will not affect lawyers right away, but we'll see what happens with these legal tech companies, how they integrate AGI, whatever that looks like at the time. But for now, unless you're like on a deal involving AGI, you're probably not going to interface with it directly, but we will see the societal effects play out. And I don't have a set answer on that. All right, so client-related issues. We covered some of the substantive aspects that you would help your clients navigate. Now I have a short story for you. All right, attorney use of legal AI tools. Short story. This is Bob. Bob's been practicing for 15 years, long time. He's barred in Florida and Texas. He's a big deal. He just learned about this cool thing called ChatGPT. He used ChatGPT for the first time ever in legal research, and he found 9 awesome cases, like fantastic citations were all there, and then he decided to file it in Wyoming federal court. The only issue was none of these cases existed. So the judge issued an order to show cause, asking Bob to say, why should we not sanction or fine you? And then Bob had to file a declaration in court, apologizing to the court, apologizing to his colleagues, and apologizing to the law firm. And he admitted in this declaration he never used AI tools before, didn't even know what an AI hallucination was. So this is our true story. And what did Bob do wrong? He didn't take this AI course, number one. And number two, you don't want to be like Bob because he never used AI tools, didn't learn about the shortcomings. And this is a true story that literally happened last week. So this is the law firm. I'll say the name, doesn't matter. Morgan & Morgan, you guys have probably heard of them. I get ads all the time when I'm on YouTube from them. It's wild. But big law firm. And I mention that because to date, a lot of these AI hallucination cases have been filed by like solo practitioners, small law firms. But this is one of the first instances where a national law firm has filed hallucinated cases. And it just goes to show that if you don't understand how to use these tools and you're like Bob and just use ChatGPT, you're going to end up in very hot water, and it's very embarrassing for your career. So the judge, in response, issued that order to show cause, laid out the 9 cases, and then said, none of these exist. Tell me why I should not fine you or sanction you as a lawyer. And this is the actual deposition. The guy's name's not Bob. I made that up. Didn't want to be too mean and throw him under the bus at Case Western. But this is the actual excerpts from his declaration where he said, this was my first time in my career that I ever used AI for queries of this nature. My reliance was misplaced. I failed to verify the cases. And as a result, I've come to learn the term AI hallucinations and take full and sole responsibility. I'll give him credit. Here's another issue in this case. I don't know if you guys are familiar with local counsel, but this is a law firm. They do not have offices in Wyoming. So if you're a law firm or a lawyer and you have an issue in another state and you're not barred there, most of the time you can't practice law there, almost all the time. So that law firm had to hire local counsel in Wyoming, which is usually just anyone you could find. And this local counsel signed off on this because that's kind of how local counsel works. They're not doing substantive legal representation. It's more of they sign it off because they're admitted in the courts, and it allows you as the big law firm to go practice there for that one issue you're dealing with. So this also got the local counsel in trouble too, because they just signed off on this, but now they're the signing attorney, so they're also responsible. This lawyer took responsibility, said the local counsel had nothing to do with it, wasn't their fault at all. But this just goes to show in the future, maybe you all will be local counsel for someone else. So it's not just you checking your own research, it's you checking the research of anything you're signing off on, because you as local counsel will be responsible as well. And here are the other cases. This is 2023. These are the first big ones we saw: Colorado, New York, involving Michael Cohen filing fake cases. Happened in November in Texas. So this is one of those things where ChatGPT launched publicly November 2022. We saw a good amount of cases in 2023, and you would have thought, like, lawyers at that point, by the end of 2023, seeing all these headlines, they would kind of chill out and know that you can't use ChatGPT because it has hallucinated cases. But it really keeps happening. This is November, and then, of course, the one from this past week. An interesting one, I have a little note here. I had a bunch of case citations, but just too much. Pro se litigants too. There are over 15 incidents now where pro se litigants have filed in both state court and federal court hallucinated cases, a bunch of gibberish that's legal analysis. So they're using these AI tools as well. So that's something to look out for if you're going against a pro se litigant. At my last law firm, we were a bigger law firm, but we litigated against pro se litigants because we had a client who was a credit reporting agency. So it's very common for credit reporting agencies to get these pro se litigants suing them. So I was dealing with a lot of pro se litigants, which in some cases is a lot more difficult because their filings are not structured. They will cite random stuff, but you have to like check what they're doing. So it actually makes it a little tougher in some cases to litigate against a pro se litigant. You find yourself in that situation, if something looks like it's written by ChatGPT or there's a bunch of case citations, double check them because there may be a good chance they used AI, and that's something you want to raise to the judge. Even the misinformation experts, this is an interesting one. This also involved the deepfake law that I mentioned earlier. This is Minnesota. Minnesota passed this deepfake law to prevent the use of deepfakes in elections, and it was then challenged in the courts on First Amendment grounds and other grounds. Then the Attorney General stepped in to defend the law, and he hired a misinformation and communications expert from Stanford. That expert wrote an expert report to help support the law, and it just so happened that he used AI to help write his report, and he cited articles that did not exist. So a misinformation expert put misinformation in his expert report on a case to prevent misinformation. So even the experts are doing this still. Pretty interesting, and that was from November of this past year. Okay, other issues raised by AI, and this almost rounds out 2 slides left in this kind of survey of some of the issues presented by AI. When you practice law, when you're going to file something in court, you have to pay attention to the local rules, the judge rules, that's standard, but now there may be even another step for you to follow, and that's seeing if your court has AI-specific certification requirements. Judge Brantley Starr, out of the Northern District of Texas, he was the first one to issue a standing order saying if you're going to use AI in my court, you need to certify that it's accurate, and let me know that you're doing that. Since then, more than 200 state and federal judges have updated their standing rules, and a lot of them are changing now. I assigned you guys in Illinois basically guidance from the Illinois Supreme Court, and in that, it goes to show that they're not requiring a new AI certification. Why do you think courts are now kind of shifting away from requiring this extra AI certification? All right, so the reason is because you already certify as a lawyer when you file that something's accurate and true and that you stand by it. So now creating a second layer of that just because you use AI doesn't really make sense. Without that second requirement, you're still fully responsible for everything you file, even if you used AI. So there's this kind of redundancy. There was that immediate knee-jerk reaction like, let's add another requirement because AI is proliferating and we see all these hallucinated cases get filed. But now courts are really slowing down. Judge Starr even said at a conference, I believe it was last April, that he's willing to reevaluate his standing order to get rid of it because he sees it may not be necessary anymore. But nonetheless, double check before you file something in court, state court, federal court, what is that judge's rules on AI? And even in one court in the Northern District of Illinois, they have this rule: parties may not use artificial intelligence to draft their memorandum or as authority to support their motions. Anyone see a big problem with that? So the issue on that, and we'll see this very shortly, the definition of artificial intelligence is very, very broad. If you're using spell check, that is a form of artificial intelligence. If you're using Westlaw or Lexis, when you put in a search, it doesn't just return the most recent case. It'll put to the top, using algorithms, the most cited cases, the most authoritative, what's responsive. That is a form of artificial intelligence. So I think this just demonstrates a lack of understanding from the court on what AI actually is, because otherwise this would prevent you from using so many different applications that we've used for decades now to help draft memorandum, as well as to find authority to support our motions. So that rounds out, does AI really matter? That question I asked over an hour ago now, the answer is yes. It's here to stay, and we're going to talk about why learning about it matters. To summarize all the things we talked about, you're going to encounter it in practice. You will encounter AI because employers may require you to use it. By the time you guys graduate for the 1Ls, I think it's going to be standard process. Every task you work on, your starting point will be using AI tools. Opposing sides may use it. They may use it in expert reports, declarations. They may cite false information. And if you're able to flag that, it could be a big value add to your team as a lawyer. Judicial orders, you're going to need to go through and understand standing orders from the court on AI. Your experts and vendors may use it. If you're using an AI tool, you need to understand how the data is being used by that legal AI tool. You can't just put your client's information into an AI tool and not know what goes on with it. Your clients will have legal issues arising from it, helping them navigate these new laws that are going to come up in all the states, ethical obligations to understand it, and perhaps you may be obligated to use it in the future, and you will encounter it in your everyday life. Just to be a well-rounded lawyer, it's important to have an understanding of basic things that are going on in society. You could get a call from your client to say, your client may say, I just saw this news about DeepSeek, the market's tanked, our stock's tanked, tell me what's going on. And if you don't know what DeepSeek is, you can't even describe how GPUs played into it, anything basic about AI, and you can't talk to your client about it, they're not going to rely on you when they have AI-related issues come up. So it's important just to be well-rounded and have a basic understanding of the technology, of all these things that are going on in the AI sphere. So learning about AI, we're now going to shift into the more substantive aspects of getting into the tech terms and the technology underpinning AI. So when you talk about learning about AI, I typically break it into 3 categories. First is understanding LLM technology, that is large language models, how they're being developed, where they're currently at in terms of capabilities, and how it's being used across different industries. 2, the use of AI in legal practice, that's specific to us lawyers, how it's being used, what's the best ways to use it, and then how can we use it ethically in line with different state requirements for our professional responsibility and ethical duties. And then 3 is more substantive. This is AI regulation and legislation. What's the federal government doing with respect to AI? What are the agencies doing with respect to AI? What are the states doing? So these are 3, all related to AI, but all different areas and different approaches based on how I see the best ways about learning about AI. So by a show of hands, who's used ChatGPT? I'm going to ask a reverse question. Has anyone not used ChatGPT? I respect it. I respect the confidence. Anyone else not used ChatGPT? Really? What do you do in your free time? No, I'm kidding. All right. So I'd say everyone but 2. Okay. Have you used Claude by a show of hands? Okay. Google Gemini. All right, less than Claude. DeepSeek. Who's actually downloaded and used or just used the application online? Show of hands, a little higher. I'd say like 10%. Ooh, go back. Okay, and then let's do the reverse question on this one. Who has not used AI before at all? Okay. I'll say I bet you have, because AI is a very broad definition. Do you have Face ID unlock on your phone? Yeah, I never used AI. That's fair. It's kind of a trick question. Okay, so that's interesting, and that's usually the stats. Most people use ChatGPT, then Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek. A little sketchy, we'll talk about it, but props to you guys who do it. Okay, so brief overview of AI and why I talk about how everyone's actually used AI in its actual definition. So dating back to the 1950s, this was the first iterations of AI when it was being experimented with, conceptualized, and in fact, there was a chatbot called Eliza created many, many years ago in the 1950s. And this is actually a recreation of the exact chatbot. So this is 1960s. This is available in the 1960s. So I'll play a little interaction with this chatbot. So you can see it's not great. But the point is, it's a chatbot, been around for 66, do the math, what is that, like 60 years? So it's pretty crazy. The difference is this is obviously super simplistic. It's more hard-coded with certain rules, where if it'd be coded on the back end, where if the user says hello, respond with, hello, how are you? Or respond with a set number of options. It can have more dynamic conversations. But the point is, that is a form of AI, been around for many, many years. Going to the 1980s and 1990s, you have the emergence of the first legal research databases, which would use algorithms and filters, which are a form of artificial intelligence, to help lawyers. In the 2000s through 2020s, you have more advanced research techniques, better algorithms to surface more relevant documents and cases that you're looking for, as well as the proliferation of e-discovery tools that were tech-powered. So this has been around for a very long time, the use of AI in society, as well as the use of AI in legal practice. The big game changer was 2022. And can anyone explain what was we heard a little bit of buzz about this, but everything changed with the advent of ChatGPT. Can anyone tell me what characteristics made ChatGPT fundamentally different? It's a bit of an opinion question too, so yeah. We should just get you a permanent microphone.
Well, just the fact that you can have like a conversation with it. You can ask it. It's not, as you said, programmed to give you 2 or 3 answers, but rather it's a probabilistic, right? It's looking at large data sets and then answering based on what it thinks, which a lot of the times is right. So, yeah.
Yeah, spot on. The big change was, one, terminology-wise, this is the really proliferation of generative AI. Generative AI has been around also for a while, but it's now economically viable, where many people could use it for many different tasks. It's adding value. Immediately, it could help write social media posts, blog articles. It's providing actual economic business value. It's free. So that was a huge game changer where anyone can access it at your fingertips, whereas earlier iterations of OpenAI's GPTs, which again started in like 2015, there were early iterations, usually only available to developers. So this was public, free, economically valuable, and it's a lot more dynamic than obviously these old chatbots. And you can see, I'll play it for just a couple seconds. Same conversation with ChatGPT that I had with that old 1966 chatbot. And there it goes. Big difference between those two chatbots. So now that we know that AI has been around for a very long time, dating back to the 1950s, 1960s. The question is, what exactly is artificial intelligence? So this is another one that has a varying definition. You could Google definition of artificial intelligence, probably get 10 different definitions, but there is a general agreed upon core definition or core understanding of what it is. Basically just technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capability. A very broad definition, and it encompasses a lot of things that you may not otherwise think it does. Face ID, you go on social media, there's algorithms behind the scenes that you don't see that'll prop up your friends, your family, people you like engaging with. They'll be at the top of your feed. It's no longer the most recent post. That is a form of an algorithm and machine learning, and that is a form of artificial intelligence. You have self-driving cars. That's more in the physical landscape. There's a form of artificial intelligence. And of course, generative AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek, a fan favorite here. And it's important to understand that when we talk about generative AI, that's just one example of AI, because generative AI is a subset of artificial intelligence. And here's the definition of generative AI. And it's easy to understand and remember because it's literally in the name, generative AI, you're just generating new content. It's a form of AI that generates new content. In contrast, for example, with a self-driving car, you're not generating new content from a self-driving car, but you are generating new content with a chatbot where you type in information and you get a video, you get a text, you get a picture, you're generating something new. So the definition of generative AI is deep learning models that generate high quality outputs, whether it be text, images, videos, based on the training data that it's seen already. So that's the definition of generative AI. Examples, you could also call them subsets because these are broader categories. Examples of generative AI are large language models, which are text-based. That's you talking to ChatGPT, typing, hi, how are you? You get a response, I'm doing great, how are you? That is text-based, that's a large language model, an LLM, and that's what we're really gonna focus on for the most part, because again, the practice of law is text-based, you're writing, so that is what's gonna be used in most of the legal AI tools that you interact with. Image generation is another one. That's you typing, give me an image of a cat, you get a picture back. That is a form of generative AI because it's generating new content. Audio generation models, this is another one where you're typing in and you're getting audio in response. Again, all of these are generating new content, just different forms of content. Yet they're all examples of generative AI. And now to take it to the lowest level, examples of LLMs, large language models, again, still part of generative AI, but there's a subset of generative AI. You have GPT-4, which is the general framework for OpenAI's models. You have BERT, which is Google's. You have Llama, which comes from Meta. So these are examples of large language models. And if you're a visual learner, you're gonna love this one. Here's all that stuff put into a visual format. Broadest category, artificial intelligence. You have a subcategory, machine learning. We're not gonna go too in depth on it, but I have the definition here. It's again, another broad category where it's essentially just algorithms that make predictions based on data that it's seen. It's a very broad category. Then you have deep learning. This is a little bit more constricted in terms of what it encompasses. This is a subset of machine learning using neural networks and layers to identify relationships between data. Probably makes no sense to you right now. We're gonna cover it more in depth in a couple slides. Then you get down to generative AI and large language models. So this is the process, and then it's within large language models where you have ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek. Any questions on that, kind of how these terms correlate with one another? Cool. Okay, large language models now. We're gonna define what is a large language model. At its most simple, it's an AI model that generates and replicates human language. So when you hear this word LLM, that's essentially just what it is, generating new text in human language. Here's some of the examples. We've talked about them pretty extensively at this point. These are some of the big ones, but there are tens of thousands of large language models out there. It's just you kind of just hear about ChatGPT, you'll hear about Gemini, you'll hear about Claude, DeepSeek when it hits the news, but there are tens of thousands out there. Here are some of the main ones. This is your quick guide. And by the way, I'm gonna send you all the PowerPoints after this. I should have told you that beforehand. But here are some of the big examples. Does anyone know we'll jump to Mistral. Anyone know what country Mistral is based out of? Yeah, you speak French, let's chat. It's a tough one. So these are some of the examples, and it's kind of sometimes hard to keep the terms clear because you have the parent company, then you have a chatbot name, and then you have an LLM name. So Google, Gemini, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Meta AI, but then they're also called Llama here, so you'll hear Llama pretty often. Anthropic, Claude, Mistral, LeChat. Mistral is like the European Union's only competitive LLM at this point in time. So it's kind of like their baby. There was a big AI summit in France the other week, so they're hyping it up big time. Alibaba, based in China, they have Qwen. You have XAI, which is Grok by Elon Musk, and DeepSeek, which is called DeepSeek, and then you have V3 and R1. These are the ones that kind of set the market ablaze over the past month. DeepSeek came out with V3 first, which got some traction, but it was R1 that ultimately kind of set that market like $1 trillion in market cap going down. But yeah, this is just to kind of give you an understanding of how the terminology differs between the parent company, the actual chat name, and then the LLM. And these LLMs are basically powering these chatbots. And what you see here is the user interface. This is like the chatbot you're actually engaging with. So when you talk to ChatGPT, you're engaging with the interface that's powered by these large language models that are actually underlying technology getting you the response. Okay, so pre-class assignment. I'm sure everyone did it for a Friday on Valentine's Day. I had you guys do a couple exercises using ChatGPT, Gemini, as well as Claude. Anyone want to tell me which one was the best? We'll go through. Who thinks ChatGPT was the best? Who says Gemini? Who says Claude? Who didn't do any of the pre-class assignments? His hand went up so fast, my God. Okay, so that's good to know. I'm gonna run through, and then let me ask this. One person, tell me, did you encounter any hallucinated cases going through the exercises? You did. Tell us about your experience.
Well, essentially, I asked it about the holding of a case we did for our motion to dismiss. And instead of it being like a baseball bat, they hallucinated that they were hit by a flying hot dog.
Wow.
And it was the wrong person, the wrong date, the wrong stadium. But the flying hot dog was the best part.
Did not expect that thing. I have no response. Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyone else have hallucinated cases as a result of the pre-class assignment?
I didn't really have a hallucinated case in terms of like the entire facts being completely different, but I
No
believe
flying hot dogs?
No flying hot dogs. But there was, I think, with Gemini, which specifically actually kind of gives links to apparently where it's supposedly pulling its sources from. There was a case that just had the completely wrong citation number, and that when you actually look at the case title and what it was talking about, it was correct, but just completely missed the mark on getting that citation right. Even though it said it specifically drew it from the website, and going to the website, you could see as well, it was still, the website was correct, but for some reason the AI just completely did not seem to kind of draw that line between what the website's information was and what it was actually presenting.
Yeah. And I did the same assignments and also got hallucinated cases. So this is just to underscore. Yeah, question?
As a law professor, I check just to see what my students are going to get, and I see definitely wrong cases, hallucinated cases, anything you want, things I've never heard about before because I'm an expert. Even my own research saying things I never put in my articles. So, so yeah, there's still error, a lot of error.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, that's one of the big takeaways from this pre-class assignment, to see that hallucinations happen very often, especially in non-legal AI tools. And imagine writing a memo for you specifically, and a student said like flying hot dog in a case where it had no flying hot dog. That'd be crazy. So yeah. So I'm gonna quickly run through very fast my experience with hallucinated cases, because at least one person didn't do it. So we'll do it live for you. Here's the prompt. Give me case citations from Missouri that address personal jurisdiction. Gives me a bunch. Look at them, they look great. Those citations look beautiful. But then I said, do these cases actually exist? And it said, I'm sorry, they're not real. They were illustrative. And then it asked me, would you like me to find real cases? And I said, give me real cases. I was losing patience. And then it gave me more cases. Again, citations look beautiful. And then I said, again, do these cases actually exist? And it says, yes. And I said, are you sure that they all exist? And it said, I apologize. To ensure accuracy, let me go through them. And then it told me one of them exists. And then I said, I want all 5 confirmed that they exist. And it said it confirmed it. And then it said it confirmed that one. And then ultimately said they're all fake. So point being, you're being gaslit. It's like an X on Valentine's Day. I had to get one cringe pun in, and I did it. But anyway, the point where you could even double down with these chatbots, and they will double down that they're right, and you keep prompting it and prompting it. You have no idea if it's accurate or not until you actually look it up yourself. So not a great source for legal research. And the key takeaway, double check your work, always, even on legal AI tools. We'll get into that more tomorrow when we actually use CoCounsel and Lexis. But even on those tools, not 100% reliable yet. And I say that, but even these companies will tell you it straight up. This is an actual response from CoCounsel. And do the pre-exercises for tomorrow. It'll be very valuable. You'll even see on the bottom of all of your responses that you get from CoCounsel, it'll tell you the above response is AI generated, may contain errors, it should be verified for accuracy. So like the leading tech products will even tell you our tool is not 100% accurate, got to double check everything. So now we're going to shift and we're going to talk about actually how large language models work. And for those keeping score at home, we'll take a break in 15 minutes. So we'll ride it out for 15 minutes more. How large language models work, I'll preface this by saying they are rapidly changing. The core technology is not necessarily changing per se, so everything I show you will still be relevant, but the model capabilities are changing in terms of their complexity, their responses, the quality of the responses, as well as the video production capabilities, picture production capabilities. But just know they are rapidly changing, so you're going to hear about new model releases very soon, and I'll give you a heads up on what model releases to actually expect in the coming months. Another preface note before we talk about how large language models work, they are still considered a black box. Even the leading experts, even these companies themselves that are building these tools do not know every single step in the process from you inputting the information to the output you get as a user. We know the general flow, we know the general architecture, but we do not have a full understanding. And that's partly because there are billions, and now in some of these models, trillions of data points. And there's weights and biases that interact and draw relationships between these data points. Those are called parameters, and it's virtually impossible to map an input all the way to an output, tracking every single parameter and every single data point that it's touched on. So it's still a black box in that respect. So there is issues that come from this in itself. Not understanding the process from input to output makes it difficult to track, may be difficult to regulate as well. If you're a regulator of a state or a country saying you need to be transparent about the input and the outputs, but technologically it's not feasible, that could raise potential issues. Also raises bias issues. We'll talk about some of the bias more in a bit, but these large language models have been prone to biases because they're trained on data from the past. So all human writing that has been biased based on gender, race, any other metric, that could ultimately influence the output of a large language model, especially when you do not know that whole process from start to finish. So now we're going to jump into a high-level summary, basically about how these large language models were actually created. Step one, they're trained on massive amounts of data. So we spoke earlier in the copyright context, these AI companies literally just went out, web scraped all the information you could possibly think of. Web pages from Reddit, Wikipedia, books, articles, any text medium you could think of, they went out, scraped that. Then they trained their model to identify patterns in human language. Basically just looking at what words commonly follow one another, what words are commonly associated with one another in English human language. They were then trained to then give output. It was not trained to do research and give you an accurate answer. So when you ask a question of ChatGPT, find case law in Ohio about stand your ground or whatever, it's not going in and doing research like you would in a research database to find the accurate answer. It is literally just trained to generate human text. And it's going to be based on probabilities, which we'll get into in the next couple steps. But it's an important concept to know. It's not looking for facts. It's not looking for the right answer. It's predicting the next most likely word based on the patterns in the human language that's already seen in billions and trillions of sources of data. Step two, after step one, you're going to be left with an LLM model that just is gibberish. It'll give you random responses. It'll go on tangents. It's not focused. So step two is a requirement to fine-tune these large language models. Basically, developers, researchers, these AI companies will take a sample input that a user would put in and then show the model an ideal output. So it's able to structure its answer based on what an answer should look like in a better, more refined way. So this is the fine-tuning aspect where you really tailor the chatbot, fine-tune it in a way it gives better responses that are valuable for the end user. Then three, Human feedback, reinforced learning, human in the loop. These are all terms you're going to hear. This is the aspect, the part of the process where humans are actually involved in analyzing the output from the chatbot and then actually providing feedback on it, saying this is a good answer, this is a bad answer. One of the ways this manifests in legal practice is there are these big legal AI companies. Obviously, you all know Thomson Reuters, Lexis, Harvey is a big one. These companies are actively hiring lawyers, former big law lawyers, to go in-house to literally help improve their LLM models. So these lawyers are literally sitting there grading output from large language models, because that is human reinforced learning, because they then take that output, some of the lawyers will improve it, they feed it back to the model to show it what a lawyer response should actually look like, and that helps improve the model. So this is actually a new area for careers and employment where lawyers are grading outputs to improve these LLMs so these AI companies can then sell that product and improve product to lawyers in practice. So that's generally the process at a very high level. Train on a bunch of data, identify the patterns, get these LLMs generating output based on probabilities in the data it's seen. Step 2, fine tune it to make sure it's actually being more responsive in certain contexts, can follow user instructions. Step 3, constantly improve it using human in the loop feedback to make it better for certain domain specific industries like the practice of law. So now the question is, how are these large language models providing instantaneous outputs? You type something in, we'll do something very simple. The dog eats from the, if you type this into ChatGPT, you'll get an output that says the bowl. So the question is, how do we go from an input to this LLM completing the sentence in a way where it makes a lot of sense, pretty coherent sentence? Very simple one. You can imagine more complex cases where you ask, what is a motion to dismiss? And it'll give you a pretty accurate answer. The question is, how do you get from A to B? What's going on in between? And here is what's going on in between. You put the input in as a user, it's passed through the neural network, it's then given, the neural network then produces probabilities, that is the likelihood of what word would come next based on the training data it's seen, and in the process, there's first a tokenization embedding layer. Make sense, everybody? No, of course it doesn't. Someone's shaking their head over there. Now, we gotta go into the details of all this. We don't know what a neural network is. We don't know what tokenization is. We do not know what embeddings are. So we don't know the full process yet. But I wanna show you the high level overview before we go into the details. And before going into those details, 2 overarching things to remember. Basically, this is a big takeaway. Large language models are predicting the next token based on the training data it's seen. So all these large language models train on a bunch of data. New York Times articles, Reddit pages, all the articles you could think of. They're looking for patterns in human language. They're identifying the most common patterns. And then they're predicting what's gonna come next in the sentence based on all the similar phrasings of words that it's seen in the training data. So it'll commonly see in stories, articles, whatever, the dog will eat from a bowl. That's how it's able to finish that sentence. And note, I did not say word, I said token and put word in parentheses, and I'll explain why in just a bit. But it's an important distinction, a little bit of semantics, but if you want to sound really smart, you say no, it doesn't predict the next word, it predicts the next token. And another baseline understanding for large language models, they don't actually know things. It's, again, predicting the next word. So it's not going in and researching for you, pulling an accurate fact statistic. It's literally predicting. So they don't have this internal knowledge set that it's tapping into per se. It's tapping into training data to look for those patterns. Now that we have those 2 understandings, we're now going to go more in depth to that whole process, starting with tokens. So large language models, they understand tokens, and then from there, they understand numbers. At the end of the day, computers understand numbers, humans understand language. So there needs to be that intermediate step where your input as a user, using natural human language, has to be converted into a number so the computer can then process it through the neural network and give you an ultimate response. So step 1 is breaking up the input into tokens. This is called tokenization. And this is what it looks like. It's breaking up the words into subunits. Because this is a super simple example, all the words are broken up into tokens based on the words. But I have an example later on. I'll show you where it's contractual. Let's say I'm engaged in a contractual obligation. The word contractual is more complex. It's a lot longer. That would be broken up into subwords. And that's why we say tokens, not words. Because ultimately, It's predicting the next token. Here, this could be a very complex word that comes next, and the large language model would break it up and give you tokens that then form the words. So that's why it's important, because ultimately it could be broken up into smaller subwords, which would not be words in themselves. So that's step one, right here. So that's step one. Your input's broken into these tokens. Step two is embeddings. Your text input is converted to tokens, and then it's embedded as numerical representations. And here's the formal definition of an embedding: high-dimensional vector representation of the tokens that capture semantic meaning. What does that even mean? Highly complex definition. High-dimensional vector representations of the tokens that capture semantic information. Basically, this is what it is. It's an array of numbers. You just picture those tokens, the dog eats from the, those individual tokens are then converted into strings of numbers. And there's an example of just a random string of numbers, and that is how the computer, ultimately the large language model, processes this information. Another big word from this definition, high dimensional, what does that even mean? So it's very tough for a human to envision high dimensional vector representations because it goes beyond 2D, goes beyond 3D, goes beyond 4D. We're talking about possibly hundreds of dimensions. So you could picture on a graph, I'll jump here. You could picture on a graph, those numerical representations are plotted in what could be hundreds and hundreds of dimensions to draw relationships between those numerical representations, which are reflective of those tokens, which are reflective of the original words that you put in. And the reason why we have to do this is because, jump here, why do we have to compare words in a high dimensional space? Why can't we just say, oh, that chair's green, that shirt's green, they're related because they're green? Because there's so many more ways to compare words and sentences. Here's just one simple example. If I tell you, try to categorize different fruit for me. We could categorize them based on color. We could categorize them based on size. We could do weight, we could do sweetness, we could do if I like them or not, we do what country they're grown in, what country they're imported to. There are so many ways to relate words to one another, which is why we can't just do it in a 2D space, in a 3D space. They have to be compared to each other in this high dimensional space on many different axes. And here's an example of it playing out. Let's say we take these words, bee, eagle, goose, helicopter, drone, rocket. We could compare them based on the fact that they're in the sky. So on this axis heading north, all of these words are related based on that one characteristic. But if we then want to compare things based on if they have wings or not, these are the only things that have wings. None of these have wings. So they're headed in an opposite direction from those vector representations because they don't have wings. Then you have things that have engines. Obviously, none of these things have engines, so they're not related, but these things are related because they do have engines. So you think at the same time, this large language model is comparing all of these different characteristics, trying to weigh which one's more important based on the context of what information you put in, to ultimately then predict the next most likely outcome. And like I said, eagle could be plotted in this high dimensional space using over 300 different values based on all the characteristics by which you could describe what an eagle is, and those characteristics are determined based on the training data and the patterns that the LLM saw in the training phase. There's one more thing, semantic information. So we covered what high dimensional, right here, we covered what high dimensional means, many different plots, vector representation, an array of numbers, tokens, we know what that is, breaking up the input into subwords, and then finally capturing semantic information. We got to define what that is. But I'll start with a question. Are these the same word? Who says these are the same word? 1, 2. Lack of confidence higher. Who says these are the same exact word? Who says they're not the same word? Can someone tell me why they're not the same word? We'll go back there so it's convenient. Okay. How do you know which definition I'm thinking of? Exactly. These could be the same word, or they could not. What ultimately will tell you if these are the same word or not? The context. So this just demonstrates how these large language models, based on the context, the word could actually change. And this gets to why words are plotted on so many different dimensions, the extra context that you add to an input will influence how the large language model interprets the words you put in. You could say, I swam by the riverbank, and you're talking about a riverbank. You could say, I have money at the bank. Based on my use of the word money, the LLM now knows that I'm talking about a financial institution. And you could try this out yourself. I put this in the ChatGPT, finish the story. I swam by the bank, but the bank was, and it understands that I'm swimming by a riverbank because I used the word swam. Based on the context, the LLM is able to relate the word swim to my use of the word bank, and in that context, it knows what I'm talking about. Whereas here, I drove to the bank, but the bank was, finish the sentence saying closed, because typically, if you see the training data, the instances in which someone was going to a bank and it was closed and driving there alerts the LLM that we're talking about the context of a financial institution. This captures semantic meaning. And one other example, just to kind of hammer this point home, I'll be making an argument in court tomorrow versus let's play pickup at the court tomorrow. Based on the context, we're able to know these are actually different words, whereas if you just put court into the LLM, it may not know the context. So this is semantic information. Semantic meaning is another way to call it, but it's very important for large language models because the context will ultimately inform what information you get as a response, because that context will tell the LLM how to read that word in relation to the others around it. Okay, so that's the key takeaways. LLM converts your input into tokens. The tokens are converted into vector embeddings, which again, string of numbers. Those string of numbers get plotted into this high dimensional space to show you how they're related to one another. And ultimately, this is then passed through a neural network. And this is the process playing out. It's passed through a neural network, which is that intermediate step right here. Oop. One moment. Oh, 1 second, it's not coming. Okay, there we go. So that's the process playing out, passing it through the neural network. Ultimately, the neural network is going to give you a list of probable answers. Because again, it's predicting the next most likely word to come out. So it'll produce these probabilities. It'll say, finishing that sentence, based on the training data we've seen and correlating all those words to each other, we think that the bowl has this % probability of being the next word. Kite, very low. Would make no sense for kite to finish that sentence. Floor, higher probability, because based on training data, maybe it's seen stories about a dog eating off a floor. Mat could possibly make sense. Kite lower, fish lower. Ultimately, bowl is the highest and most likely output, and that is what the large language model will most likely select to finish that sentence. So that is the process of how it works. Final example before I let you go on break, just to kind of show you this in another context. The capital of the United States is, if you were to put this into a large language model, it will again tokenize it, embed it, pass it through the neural network, and in that process, it's looking at all the articles. Imagine New York Times articles, New York Post, all the articles written, Wikipedia, which will constantly say the capital of the United States is, in the USA's capital, Washington, D.C., in Washington, D.C., all these different iterations that constantly reinforce that the capital of the US is associated with Washington, D.C. Ultimately, there'll be a very high likelihood and occurrence of those words being used, showing that Washington, D.C. is the capital of the US. And ultimately, you will get the output of Washington, D.C. with a very high probability. You may get other capitals, because again, all these words are associated with now capitals of countries. You may get other low probability, but given the frequency, the high frequency of Washington, D.C. reoccurring in the training data as the capital, you're going to get Washington, D.C. as the output. Not because the LLM has a baseline knowledge or did research, simply because of probabilities based on the training data. So that wraps up how LLMs work for now. We could take a break, and then we're going to have a guest speaker at 11 when you come back. Thank you.